He grew up in a Rust Belt town surrounded by poverty, addiction, and chaos. Yet somehow, JD Vance made it to the U.S. Senate. From a troubled childhood in Appalachia to the power corridors of Washington, his rise is nothing short of astonishing. Once a harsh critic of Donald Trump, he later became one of his fiercest allies. How did a kid from Middletown, Ohio, end up shaping national politics? The journey is real and more unbelievable than fiction. James David Vance grew up in Middletown, Ohio, a small industrial city located in the Rust Belt of the United States. This region, once a powerhouse of American manufacturing, had long been grappling with economic decline, job losses, and shifting social landscapes by the time of Vance's birth. Middletown itself had once thrived on the steel industry, with major employers like Armco Steel shaping the city's identity and economy. But by the late 20th century, the town, like many in the region, was experiencing the effects of deindustrialization, leaving behind struggling families and dwindling opportunities. Vance was raised in a working-class family of Scots-Irish descent, a group whose culture and traditions had deep roots in Appalachia. His maternal grandparents, whom he affectionately referred to as Mama and Papa, had migrated to Ohio from Jackson, Kentucky, in search of better economic prospects, a journey taken by many Appalachian families during the mid-20th century. Their values, fierce loyalty, toughness, and a deep sense of pride, played a significant role in shaping Vance's upbringing. However, James David Vance grew up in a turbulent and emotionally challenging household, shaped by persistent poverty, instability, and the effects of his mother's ongoing battle with drug addiction. Born into a working-class family in Middletown, Ohio, Vance's early life was defined not by security or consistency, but by a revolving door of father figures, financial hardship, and emotional uncertainty. His mother, Bev, struggled with substance abuse for much of his childhood, a battle that deeply impacted the entire family. Her addiction, compounded by a series of failed relationships and marriages, created an unpredictable home environment where chaos often reigned. Vance witnessed firsthand the destructive cycle of addiction, how it erodes trust, disrupts family dynamics, and leaves lasting psychological scars on children. His mother's erratic behavior and frequent absences left young JD searching for stability and safety, neither of which were readily found in his immediate surroundings. At times, he was forced to move between households, experience short stints with different relatives, and confront the emotional toll of being a child caught in the storm of adult dysfunction. James David Vance graduated from Middletown High School in Ohio, a significant milestone that marked a turning point in a life that had, until then, been shaped largely by instability and emotional hardship. Though not an especially standout student in terms of academic achievement during high school, Vance had begun to develop a sense of determination and inner resolve, much of which came from the influence of his grandmother, Mama. Her unwavering support, combined with his own desire to escape the chaos of his upbringing, pushed him to look beyond the confines of his troubled environment and towards something more structured, meaningful, and transformative. Shortly after graduating, Vance made the decision to enlist in the United States Marine Corps, a choice that would prove to be one of the most defining and formative experiences of his early adulthood. For Vance, the Marines represented more than just a job or a way to pay for college. They offered a path to discipline, personal growth, and a sense of purpose that had long been absent in his life. In a world where he had often been forced to fend for himself amid emotional and financial instability, the Marine Corps provided the structure, accountability, and mentorship he had been craving. During his 4 years of service, Vance was stationed in various parts of the world, including a deployment to Iraq during the height of the war. His time in the military exposed him to a broader world, far removed from the struggles of his hometown, and instilled in him critical life skills such as leadership, responsibility, and resilience. He learned how to navigate pressure, how to work effectively in teams, and how to build confidence in his own abilities, qualities that would later serve him well in both academic and professional settings. While many young men and women return from combat with emotional wounds, Vance has often spoken of his time in the military as restorative, even therapeutic in some ways. It gave him distance from the personal chaos of his youth and allowed him to see his own life with greater perspective. The self-control, organization, and resilience that the Marine Corps instilled in him served as a foundation for his future achievements. The experience rewired his thinking, as he has described it, helping him to break free from self-destructive patterns and adopt a more disciplined, goal-oriented mindset. In many ways, the Marine Corps became the bridge between Vance's troubled past and his promising future. It taught him not just how to survive, but how to lead, how to persevere, and how to believe in the possibility of change. His years in uniform set the stage for the next chapter of his life, pursuing higher education and ultimately rising to national prominence as a best-selling author, venture capitalist, and political figure. After completing his service in the United States Marine Corps, JD Vance returned to civilian life with a renewed sense of purpose and discipline. Armed with the skills and confidence he had gained during his time in the military, he made the ambitious decision to pursue higher education, a goal that had once seemed distant and uncertain given his tumultuous upbringing. He enrolled at Ohio State University, where he majored in political science and philosophy, completing his bachelor's degree in an impressive 2 years. Vance approached college with the same intensity and focus that the Marine Corps had instilled in him. He was no longer the uncertain teenager from Middletown. He was a mature, driven student, determined to make the most of his education. The military had taught him how to manage time, how to set long-term goals, and how to push through challenges, qualities that served him well in the rigorous academic environment. Rather than simply attending classes, Vance immersed himself in his studies with discipline and a deep intellectual curiosity. His choice of majors, political science and philosophy, reflected his growing interest in the systems that shape society and the underlying moral questions that guide human behavior. Political science offered a framework for understanding governance, public policy, and the socio-economic issues he had witnessed growing up in the Rust Belt. Philosophy, on the other hand, allowed him to explore ethical theories, logic, and questions of identity and personal responsibility, all topics that resonated deeply with his personal journey. During his time at Ohio State, Vance took full advantage of the opportunities available to him. He participated in internships, joined campus organizations, and engaged with professors who recognized his intellect and drive. He graduated with high honors, distinguishing himself as a serious and capable student. His success in completing a 4-year degree in just 2 years was not only a testament to his intelligence and work ethic, but also a reflection of how deeply he believed in the power of education to change a life. Vance's academic performance and personal story caught the attention of mentors who encouraged him to apply to law school, specifically, some of the most prestigious programs in the country. His achievements at Ohio State were not just an academic milestone. They were a powerful symbol of what was possible when determination met opportunity. For a young man who had grown up surrounded by dysfunction and limited prospects, graduating from college represented both a personal triumph and a springboard to even greater ambitions. After earning his bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy from Ohio State University in just 2 years, JD Vance set his sights on one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the country, Yale Law School. For a young man from a working-class town in the Rust Belt, the very idea of attending Yale, a place often associated with elite circles of power and privilege, once seemed unthinkable. Yet Vance not only gained admission, he thrived there, graduating with a Juris Doctor and further solidifying his place as one of the most compelling examples of upward mobility in contemporary America. At Yale, Vance found himself surrounded by classmates from vastly different socioeconomic backgrounds, many of whom had come from Ivy League undergraduate programs and elite private schools. The cultural contrast was stark. He often felt like an outsider, acutely aware of the unspoken codes of class, wealth, and social capital that dominated elite spaces. Yet, instead of allowing these differences to undermine his confidence, he used them as a lens through which to further understand the structural inequalities and unspoken barriers that separated the American working class from the nation's power centers. One of the most significant relationships Vance developed during his time at Yale was with Professor Amy Chua, a best-selling author best known for Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. Chua became a key mentor to Vance, recognizing his intelligence, unique life story, and potential to shape public discourse. Her guidance extended beyond academics. She helped Vance navigate the unfamiliar world of elite professional networking and encouraged him to turn his personal experiences into a meaningful narrative. It was Chua who later introduced him to a literary agent, setting in motion the eventual publication of Hillbilly Elegy. Under Chua's mentorship, and with the support of others at Yale, Vance began to see that his background was not a liability, but a perspective sorely missing in the institutions of American law, government, and media. He began writing seriously, reflecting on the family dysfunction, economic despair, and cultural alienation that had defined his upbringing. The analytical rigor of law school, combined with his lived experience, gave him the tools to frame his personal story within the broader context of class struggle, cultural identity, and economic mobility in America. In 2016, JD Vance published Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis, a deeply personal and unflinchingly honest account of his upbringing in a troubled Rust Belt family. The memoir chronicled his journey from a chaotic childhood in Middletown, Ohio, marked by poverty, addiction, and instability, to his eventual success as a Yale Law School graduate. But Hillbilly Elegy was far more than a coming-of-age story. It became a lens through which many Americans sought to understand the struggles of the white working class in post-industrial America. Upon its release, the book quickly climbed bestseller lists, eventually spending months on the New York Times bestseller list. It resonated powerfully across political and social lines, especially during the tumultuous 2016 election year. As political commentators and analysts scrambled to explain the rise of populism and the disaffection felt by millions in rural and working-class communities, Vance's memoir offered something rare: an insider's account of life in a part of America that had long been overlooked by national media and misunderstood by coastal elites. What set Hillbilly Elegy apart was its willingness to examine both structural forces and personal responsibility. Vance wrote candidly about his mother's struggle with opioid addiction, the instability that came with a revolving door of father figures, and the emotional trauma that shaped his early years. But he also praised the tough love and values instilled in him by his grandmother, Mama, whose influence he credited with helping him break the cycle of dysfunction. He painted a nuanced portrait of a culture caught between pride and pain, resilience and self-destruction. The book sparked widespread debate. Supporters praised it as a much-needed wake-up call, offering insight into the cultural and emotional toll of economic decline in America's heartland. Critics, however, argued that Vance's emphasis on personal responsibility sometimes downplayed the structural inequalities and systemic failures that also contributed to the decline of working-class communities. Nonetheless, Hillbilly Elegy became a cultural touchstone, assigned in classrooms, discussed in boardrooms, and referenced by politicians across the spectrum. For Vance, the success of the book brought national recognition and opened the door to new opportunities, including public speaking engagements, media appearances, and eventually a career in politics. But more importantly, it placed a spotlight on communities that had long felt ignored and voiceless, making Hillbilly Elegy a pivotal work in the conversation about class, identity, and the American dream in the 21st century. Following the success of Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance emerged as more than just a memoirist. He became a public intellectual and cultural commentator, particularly on issues related to the white working class, economic despair, and social dislocation in America's heartland. As his visibility increased, so did his engagement with politics. Though he had once expressed skepticism about certain conservative figures and had a relatively moderate tone in his early interviews, Vance gradually became more aligned with the populist wing of the Republican Party, reflecting both a personal ideological shift and a keen awareness of the broader political currents reshaping American conservatism. By the late 2010s, Vance began to immerse himself more deeply in conservative political circles. He appeared regularly on television, contributed op-eds to national publications, and spoke at events focused on the economic challenges facing Middle America. His commentary often echoed themes from his book, particularly the erosion of traditional family structures, the spiritual void he perceived in many post-industrial communities, and the disconnect between America's elite institutions and everyday working people. These issues resonated strongly with the populist movement that was gaining traction within the GOP, especially after Donald Trump's election in 2016. Vance's alignment with this wing of the party became more explicit over time. He expressed support for Trump's nationalist message and echoed concerns about globalization, immigration, and the loss of manufacturing jobs, positions that diverged from the more traditional pro-market conservatism of earlier Republican orthodoxy. He began to argue that conservatives needed to focus less on abstract free market principles and more on protecting American families, industries, and communities from the forces of economic and cultural decay. This shift placed him squarely within the new wave of conservative populists who sought to redefine the party's priorities. His growing influence was also supported by his connections to powerful conservative donors and thought leaders. Vance co-founded Naria Capital, a venture capital firm based in Cincinnati, with backing from billionaire Peter Thiel, a prominent figure in right-leaning Silicon Valley circles. Thiel's mentorship and support played a key role in helping Vance transition from the world of books and business into the political arena. By the early 2000s and 20s, Vance had become a leading voice in the conservative populist movement, often speaking out against what he described as the cultural elitism of coastal institutions, the failures of neoliberal economic policy, and the rise of progressive ideology in American life. His rhetoric grew sharper and more politically charged, signaling not only a personal transformation, but a readiness to enter the political fray himself. In July 2021, JD Vance officially announced his candidacy for the U.S. Senate in Ohio, entering a crowded Republican primary race to succeed retiring Senator Rob Portman. His decision to run marked the culmination of years of rising political engagement, during which he had transitioned from best-selling author and cultural commentator to an increasingly influential figure within the populist wing of the Republican Party. Vance's campaign quickly became one of the most closely watched Senate races in the nation, as it encapsulated the evolving identity of the modern GOP. Vance entered the race with significant name recognition, thanks to the widespread impact of his memoir Hillbilly Elegy. However, he also faced immediate scrutiny. Critics resurfaced his past social media posts and interviews in which he had expressed skepticism about Donald Trump during the 2016 election. In the early days of the primary, Vance worked to address this shift in tone, acknowledging his previous criticism but emphasizing that he had come to appreciate Trump's policies and his willingness to challenge the political establishment. His conversion from Trump critic to Trump ally mirrored the broader evolution of the Republican Party, and Vance positioned himself as a candidate who understood both the cultural grievances and economic anxieties of everyday Americans. The turning point in the campaign came when former President Donald Trump endorsed Vance in April 2022. Despite the crowded field of experienced Republican candidates, Trump's backing gave Vance a powerful boost. The endorsement not only signaled to GOP voters that Vance was now fully aligned with the populist MAGA movement, but it also opened the door to increased fundraising and national attention. Trump's support helped consolidate the right-wing base behind Vance, who embraced many of Trump's themes in his own campaign, opposing illegal immigration, criticizing big tech, and vowing to combat what he called the corrupt ruling class in Washington. Vance's campaign leaned heavily into culture war issues, along with traditional conservative concerns about the economy and crime. He traveled extensively throughout Ohio, meeting with voters in both rural and suburban areas, and framed his life story as proof that he could relate to the struggles of working-class families. He positioned himself as a political outsider with real-life experience, navigating poverty, addiction, and dislocation, someone who could bring authentic, unfiltered representation to Washington. In November 2022, JD Vance was elected to the United States Senate from Ohio, defeating Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan in one of the most closely watched and consequential Senate races of the midterm election cycle. Vance's victory marked a significant personal milestone and symbolized the Republican Party's continued shift toward populism, nationalism, and culturally conservative messaging, trends that had reshaped American politics since 2016. The general election campaign between Vance and Ryan drew national attention and tens of millions of dollars in spending from both parties. Though Ohio had trended Republican in recent years, Ryan ran a competitive race, portraying himself as an independent-minded Democrat focused on blue-collar economic issues. He attempted to distance himself from national Democratic leadership, highlighting his support for domestic manufacturing, opposition to certain trade policies, and his outreach to working-class voters in traditionally conservative areas. Vance, by contrast, leaned into his identity as a conservative outsider, shaped by real-world experience. He continued to emphasize the themes that had powered his rise: economic decline, social instability, and the sense that traditional American values were under assault. On the campaign trail, he positioned himself as a champion of the working class, someone who had lived the struggles of ordinary Ohioans and who could push back against what he described as the globalist elite in Washington. He also focused heavily on culture war issues, criticizing what he called woke ideology in schools, media, and corporations. One of the decisive factors in Vance's victory was the strong support he received in rural and exurban counties, where his populist message and endorsement from Donald Trump helped energize conservative voters. While Ryan performed well in urban centers and some suburban areas, Vance's dominance in the rest of the state provided the margin he needed to win. The final vote count showed Vance with a comfortable lead, affirming Ohio's status as a red-leaning state and solidifying his position as a rising star in the Republican Party. Vance's election also represented a personal journey come full circle, from a chaotic working-class childhood in Middletown, Ohio, to the highest levels of American government. His ascent defied traditional political trajectories. He was neither a lifelong politician nor a party insider. Instead, he ran as a cultural conservative shaped by life experience, military service, and a deep skepticism of elite institutions. Once in office, Vance pledged to be a voice for those who felt alienated by globalization, cultural change, and political polarization. His win made him not only a U.S. Senator, but a symbol of a new kind of Republican politics, one rooted in grievance, tradition, and a rejection of establishment norms. It also raised questions about how he would legislate in office, as a bridge builder across political divides, or as a combative figure aligned with the party's most hardline populist elements. Since his election to the U.S. Senate in 2022, JD Vance has quickly emerged as one of the most prominent voices among populist conservatives in Washington. His rise from a memoirist and political outsider to a key figure in the Republican Party is reflective of broader shifts in American politics, particularly the growing influence of populism, nationalism, and cultural conservatism within the GOP. Vance has used his platform in the Senate to become a vocal advocate for working-class Americans, challenging the established political order and pushing for policies that resonate with his base of supporters. Vance's tenure as a U.S. Senator has been marked by his staunch opposition to the so-called elite political class, which he argues has failed the working people of Ohio and the broader Rust Belt. He has become a leading critic of corporate interests, big tech companies, and the globalist forces he believes have contributed to the economic decline of Middle America. His views align closely with those of former President Donald Trump, and Vance often echoes Trump's rhetoric, emphasizing nationalism, protectionism, and skepticism of free market economics that do not prioritize American workers. His populist message resonates particularly with voters who feel left behind by globalization and the political establishment. In addition to his economic views, Vance is also a strong cultural conservative. He has taken firm stances on issues such as abortion, gun rights, and education, arguing for the importance of traditional family values and parental control in schooling. He has been critical of progressive movements in education, particularly regarding what he perceives as the spread of woke ideology in public schools and universities. These cultural issues have solidified his place as a prominent leader in the conservative movement, especially among those who believe that the cultural left has gained too much influence in American life. Vance's rise has also sparked speculation about his future political ambitions. While he is still in his early years as a U.S. Senator, political analysts and pundits frequently mention him as a potential future presidential contender. His ability to galvanize the populist wing of the GOP, his strong base of support among working-class voters, and his media presence position him as a potential leader of the party in the coming decades. Vance has also built a profile as a key spokesperson for the issues that matter most to the GOP's grassroots, making him an influential figure who could shape the future direction of the party. Some see Vance as a figure who could bridge the gap between the establishment Republican Party and the more populist grassroots movement that has grown in influence since Trump's rise. Others view him as a staunch advocate for a more combative, outsider approach to politics, challenging the conventional wisdom of Washington. Regardless of where his political journey leads, JD Vance has already become an integral part of the modern Republican Party, and his voice continues to carry significant weight in shaping debates around policy, culture, and the future of conservatism in America. What do you think about JD's journey, Vance? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.